remind
Here.
us of where we're, but Peter, you want to remind you about your appointment and things like that, please?
Peter Ward, Select Board appointee.
Thank you, Sarah.
Sarah Grimwood, Natural Resources Commission appointee.
Thank you, John Kratzley.
John Kratzley, Select Board appointee.
Thank you, John Paul.
Paul Bohm, Recreation Commission appointee.
Thank you, Tom.
Tom Kearns, Select Board appointee.
Thank you, Nancy.
Nancy Nelson, Historical Commission.
Thank you, and Burton.
Burton Flint Planning Board.
And Diane Proctor, Select Board appointee. I don't think if I've missed someone, please speak up. I don't think I have. Okay. Good evening. And we're on the penultimate, as they say, meeting of our of the CPC. We have some big deliberations to make, and I think we're going to begin this evening, thanks to the good work of Tom Kearns and others involved, to hear some updates from the Wright Tavern proposal. And I think that it's important for us to begin with that. Oh, and Charles, thank you. Would you say where you're muted, Charles?
Charles Phillips, representative from the Housing Authority.
Thank you, Charles. Welcome. So Rosalind and Tom Wilson are here, and I believe they have some updates to offer for the Wright Tavern and proposal. And because it's a significant request, I think it's important for us to hear from them before we go further in our deliberations. So welcome, Rosalind and Tom. And thank you, Tom Kearns, for spending some time working with them on this presentation. Okay.
Yes, I do want to thank Tom. It was very helpful and very constructive. And in fact, I watched the video of the last meeting, and that, it's interesting. You very seldom ever get a chance to watch other people talk about you. And it's really, we could listen to what y'all were saying without having to think about how we're going to respond. That is such a treat. And so I have to say, I really appreciated being able to really understand, really try to listen. And hopefully I'm going to walk through some slides to kind of capture. We sent it to you so we can talk about it more. Anything you want to talk about, we can go into details. But I think there's a couple of things that I think we kind of appropriate to say. And I'm going to try to keep as hard it is for me, I'm going to try to keep it to about 15 minutes, if it's shorter if I can.
Well, Tom, I hope you will go through the slides with us at some point.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay. There we go. Great. So, and we all recognize this drawing from Doolittle. Let's see if there's another place here. So what we heard in the conversations that y'all had that really were kind of three questions. One is what's going on with the current project? Is the facility like we don't know what's going on, and we may and somehow with a sense that are you guys on top of what's going on? And the second part of it is how does what we allocated in 2021 different from what you're proposing for 2022? And the third question really is dealing with the preservation restriction. There's a lot of interest and a lot of concerns about that. So we wanted to address those three questions. Question to you, did we get it right? Is there anything, and Diane, maybe you can help, do we miss anything major?
I think that's spot on. Thank you.
Well, I already mean this, and I thank you for being clear, you all being very clear, and Tom helping us to sort of set us through as well. I mean, we're sort of new at this kind of political game, and so it's trying to be who we are. Anyway, so what we're going to do is give you a little context, because there's some questions that came up in that meeting about what are we really trying to do with the Wright Tavern. And I want to share with you as how our thinking has evolved and continuing to develop. And then I'm going to spend time a little bit on the 2021 agreement, and that will include the preservation restrictions, since that's part of that. And third, just do a little quick recap about what 2022 is about and how that's different. And once again, we can go into more discussions if you're interested. So we've said, and you all probably heard us say this, that the vision we have for the Wright Tavern is it will be a center for the exploration and renewal of democracy. Concord has a lot of historic buildings, and we're looking for ways in which the Wright Tavern is not just the same as some of the other places, but is unique. both because of its location and because of its history. But what we want to do with it is that we want to recreate, as we say, an 18th, 19th century tavern and meeting place. Because in the 1700s, 1800s, and obviously 1900s, in fact, it was a meeting place in many ways. And so we want to recreate that experience. We want the building to be open to the public, so some scheduled times. We want to participate in a lot of the reenactments. I've met with Beth Williams, head of tourism, and Jonathan Lane, who's head of the Rev 250 strategies about what we want to do. We want the Wright Tavern to be really engaged in the history with reenactments and other kinds of recreations. We also want it to have buildings. If we talk about for exploration and renewal of democracy, we want to host events in that building so that, in fact, people can get a sense about what does democracy mean in the place where it started, which is what the Wright Tavern is. So we see the first floor to be what we call an engaging museum. It itself is the artifact that captured is the building itself, not some tables and chairs, but really the building itself and the things that's important. And the second floor probably will keep them because to make them public accessible to the public requires elevators, several levels of egress, et cetera. So you want to keep that basically as offices for the Wright Tavern staff and affiliates and partners and people involved, once again, as you think about. So the first floor will be the experience that people will have about the Wright Tavern and an opportunity and a place for dialogue discussions. Second floor will be for offices and things of that nature. So our goal is to have it open and fully operational by early 2024. And the reason we're doing that is because in October of 2024 will be the reenactment of the Massachusetts First Provincial Congress, which is when we decided to separate from Britain and establish democracy as a form of government. And that's a really important event. That's also three weeks before the 2024 election, if you think about it for a minute. And there's some ideas I can share with you if you're interested in some ideas that we're planning for that. And then we also want to participate in the 2025. And there'll be other things that we want to do. So what we did, and this is second part of this is that the funding and development that we're doing for the Wright Tavern sort of falls into some phases. And maybe this will be helpful in clarifying some of the questions that came through you all. The first phase, what you all were able to give us in 2021 was the structural stabilization that dealt with the critical issues of the building's stability and its endurance. It's not that the building's unstable now or unsafe now, but there's some really structural things that are needed in order for it to be working, and we'll spend more time on that in a second. Second phase is about strengthening the capabilities of the building. We are changing, there's going to be a change in use of the building. It will change from being an office to a publicly accessed building. There are different codes. There are a whole bunch of things that we have to do that's going to change the building in terms of so it can withstand the traffic. So phase two is really built around the capabilities that we need to increase and enhance in the building. Phase three is going to deal with what I call creating the experience. So what happens when you walk in the door? What happens while you're there? What do you feel when you leave? And that's what we're dealing with phase three. Phase four is going to be ongoing professional management. So that's what the sort of scheme is here that we've worked and developed here. And so I think it's important also to share a sort of core to us in terms of our operating principles is what I call is measure twice, cut once. This has taken a long time for us. We wanted to make sure that when we start to do some things in the building, we really looked at it. And particularly important to the second one is around historic preservations, that we are actually making sure, doing every effort we can to find out what is historic and how do we preserve and protect it, because that is what the building is the historic preservation of the building itself. And finally, really the consultation and collaboration and working with you all, we're gearing up on that as we begin to do more and more of getting clear about the stuff, and I've spent some more time on that, but so much of collaboration has been always part of our process. Sometimes it's kind of messy and we may not be doing as good a job as some of y'all want. So that's a quick context.
I think it would be appropriate to mention at this point that you have held a forum in which
Yeah.
you invited many members of the community to talk about that process. And that was a very open
Right, absolutely.
and collaborative effort. I just want to mention that for those who may not have participated or don't know.
It was in March of 2020. And yeah, it was one of the most interesting, enlightening. We basically were asking people in the community, what do you want to do with the Wright Tavern? What should we do with it? And what emerged was that sort of the message that says, we don't need just another, historic building. We need to do something more than that.
Yeah.
This was an interesting thing in terms of our research and discovery. This is what the plot plan looked like, and you'll see what that line across the bottom. That's the expansion of Main Street and what they had to do to tear down a bunch of buildings, really for the expansion. And our sense was it's probably about 1880, 1890 when this was developed, about the time when the Wright Tavern was bequeathed over to First Parish. So there's some different things that we can share with you. So 2021, this is what we've done with the funding that you and the support you've been giving us so far. And with the left-hand side is sort of the things we've been doing in terms of that task, and there's some other things which are part of the whole process is on the right-hand side. The beginning part of 2021 has really been more emphasis really in getting us established, getting the right people in place, doing the right kinds of things, making sure we had all the documentation. And then as we look at what happened in November and December, we're starting to have the meetings. We realized that where the Lally columns are really an important part of our sustainability, there was actually more critical issue up in the attic. And so, but we wanted to examine that, but given the importance of the historic fabric, we want to look creatively. Is there alternative ways that we can understand what's going on without having to tear down the walls or tear down parts of the ceiling? And perhaps those of them may want to speak to some of the things we've been discovering about that, both in November and December. Well,
Excuse me, Tom. Tom, can you put that on slide view to make this a little bit bigger so we can see it? Thank you.
Well, if I do that, I need to change my. Let me do this. It will, because I'm seeing this from a
A little better.
And if I do that, you'll see my slides. Let me see what I can do to make it bigger here, though.
Yeah,
Thank
that helps. That helps.
Thank you, both Paul and Tom.
Let me take this. Whoop.
Oh.
That's
Perfect.
good.
Make it a little bit lower.
Yeah.
Go back one, Tom.
Yeah, thank you.
Go back one slide, please.
There we go.
Okay, and one more.
Whoop, whoop, whoop. Yeah, thank you.
So we just wanted you to know that we wanted you to see that we've been in parallel with the work we've been doing to support the applications for the PPC. We've been preparing the reports. The architects, the historic preservation advisors have all been helping us with the initial meetings that we've had, and the tours of the buildings that we had last spring now are all being informed by much more detailed, much more intensive evaluations of the spaces. So we've had meetings with the structural engineer and the historic preservation architects and the construction team that have lasted 3 to 4 hours at a time, and we've had multiple meetings of this kind as they've very carefully examined specific walls, specific ceilings, specific parts of the building. There's a very good piece of news that I can share from the last time I presented before you, which is that we've discovered that in part, sadly, because some of the existing deterioration in the third floor in particular, we actually don't have to do anywhere near the amount of demolition, in fact, possibly no demolition at all, in order for the structural engineer to get up inside the attic. There are gaping holes that are big enough, actually, that he can do a version of arthroscopic surgery, sending cameras in on wires and actually looking into spaces. So we're very pleased to be able to report that we have to do much less of the demolition just to be able to produce the engineering requirements. And the historic preservation architects have been involved in this the entire way. Next slide. Here we are now, meeting with you all right now. And in the meantime, we've got activities that are lined up for January, February, and March. We'll be meeting with the CHC to share with them our vision and plans, and they will be seeing this timeline as well. We're going to be working with the interior design architects and finalizing contract agreements with a variety of different professionals and subcontractors. Tom, do you want to take over and talk about activities?
Sure. Yeah, we're looking actually at a interior design historical preservation architect firm. We've been sent out a number of RFQs. We're getting responses back. We're having some discussions. Amazing number of people that just can't do this with us right now. But and if you're interested, I can tell you more about who's on that list and whatever. But who some of our conversations. But we want to ultimately that somebody like that would probably be a project manager in the sense of what we're trying to do. Incorporating the preservation architects or historical architects as well as the current architects working on the plan. So it's about getting the team together to develop it. And so what we're seeing for January, as we discover what's critical and begin some priorities, that most of what the spring is going to include, that from now until really May, are two things. One track is going to be really doing a plan to really see what we need to do and where we need to do it by and what kind of funding we want to do to be necessary to make all that work. So that once again, in September, I think we've said this to you before, but we have given notice to the current tenants that their leases are going to be ending at the end of August. So that beginning of September, we can now move in and do what we need to be doing at that point in time. But we don't want to do that until we have the plans in place. And that's kind of what the spring is all about. So we're making repairs where we can. There's some simple things which we're going to do and address based on the 2021 funding, fix some repairs, some brickwork or whatever. But really spending some energy and attention on the time and the design. And it's one of the things we want to involve with that. And we'll also be during the same time of that, parallel of that is the preservation restriction. And I'll talk about that in a second, because I think that's an important part of it. So we're working on this. We've got a schedule and plans in place, and we're getting the people in place to really make sure we can carry that out. And once again, the 21 funding is really about structural integrity and the structural stability of the building. I'd like to spend a minute on the preservation restriction. I have to admit something. When you all said that we should do this, we said fine, because I think it's really good that we all want to do that. I think we want to preserve this, and we want, so like in some ways, I guess Coronado burned all the ships so that the people had to fight harder. They couldn't retreat back to Spain. That one thing we want to do is that we do want to do that. And so we did some research on preservation restrictions, and we found that most preservation restrictions are really mostly about the exterior of buildings. You all pushed back on us. And then I went back and read the fine print in our agreement, and it did say interior, and we said, okay, that's fine. That's cool. That's not a problem. Well, it is kind of a problem in a sense that, and this is where we really need to spend some time talking with y'all. But is that if we understand it, most preservation restrictions take a building and a place and lock it in the way it is today. We don't want to do that with the Wright Tavern. We're going to make changes that recreate an 18th, 19th century tavern that creates meeting rooms that we can have a lot of people. There's a lot of change that are going to be happening. We want to bring out the historical artifacts that is the building itself. And so we don't really know. So it's hard for us to lock in, if you will, right now in terms of what it's going to look like. But we have some time, because the agreement says it is due prior to submitting our plans and specifications, which we on our plan is sometime like May and June. So we will get an agreement to you, and we've actually are in conversations with an attorney now that we're going to pay for that it specializes in preservation restrictions. And she has offered to meet with committees and stuff like that, which, you know, once again, we're just at the early stages of the conversation, but we really get some advice because we got the sort of the basic document done, but now we really need to deal with this issue about where we are in time to preserve a building that we don't know exactly what's exactly going to look like. We know what the function is going to be, but what colors are going to be the walls and whether there's going to be this or that will be developed over this planning process. So it's important for us to commit and to reassure you, and it's my mistake because I thought it was just the exterior. When we had our agreement, it said interior. Yep, so we're going to do that. So to make sure we are committed to an exterior interior conditions, we need to think through it, and we have some time. There's not really a sense of urgency. We'll have this done probably in May and June, and we'll work out these agreements that we need to do with you all and with the CHC about that. So hopefully that will resolve some of the questions related to the preservation restriction. And I'm going to just say one last thing and relate to it because I know my time is up. I have more interesting pictures for you. The 2022 budget, as I said, is really for what is necessary to get the infrastructure of the building ready to be the vision that we talked about. And so and it also is important because it does demonstrate a substantial amount of support that the town is providing to the Wright Tavern. That's helpful for us in other fundraising activities that we're going to having to launch in the next month or so. So it's really important to us that we, you know, that we have your support and that we can provide the support to you to do this. Its focus, as I said, is on building the capabilities. It's the load capacity. It's the electrical wiring. It's the heating, cooling, insulation systems. It's the security systems. It's the things that involve. It's made those kinds of things. It's making sure that we've identified the historically significant features and conditions and we preserve those because that's who the Wright Tavern is actually. And we finalize all the planning documents. It's really going to be an important part of what we're doing in terms of this whole effort. And as I said, we have seen this thing in 3 phases. Phase 1 is about the structural stability. Phase 2 is about the infrastructure sort of capabilities. And phase 3 is about the creative experience that we want people to have. And there's a lot of details and stuff that this shows out what applies to what. There's dollars later on, you know, in the document that we sent to you. I'll end by saying, why are we doing this? And why is this important? I think we all have a lot of agreement on what we want the Wright Tavern to be. You know, maybe some nuances that are different, but basically we want it to be an open space, open to the public. It really takes its rightful place in history. We're very concerned about making sure that we're investing a lot of money. And this will be one of those times, I think, in the history, in the life of this building, where we make such a large investment. We want that to sustain itself for decades. So we don't have to come back and do piecemeal kinds of things. So we're doing, this is going to be done by professionals. And we want that every step along the way. It's important for us to, in terms of the funding, what it does, it represents, it's part of our overall, what we are now anticipating closer to $2 million as a budget. It continues to grow. And I guess the last part of it is we're learning a lot from working with you all. We're learning about how can we make our messages clearer and more succinct and more specific related to your needs. So the conversations we have had, we actually, although they're challenging at times, we do find them very beneficial and very important. So I'm going to stop there and I can go into any level of detail that you would like. We can bring the slides back up, but you all have a copy of the slides. And so let me open it back to Diane to how we want to facilitate a discussion.
Thank you, Tom. I see we have some questions from the committee, so I'm going to start with Tom Kearns. And I just want to say thank you for the efforts that you've undertaken. We obviously all appreciate it. Tom.
Well, hey, thank you, both Tom and Rosalind. A great job in terms of a kind of capsule of this great effort that you're undertaking. And it was a great pleasure to do a little bit of work just to help me kind of clarify some of the things that I needed to get straightened out in my own mind, and maybe vice versa in terms of the clarity. One of the things I think that's so important is the kind of sequence and flow of this. And I think as we kind of talked through it and pulled it apart and worked through it, it really helped me understand, and I think through your presentation this evening, the sequence of having an executed grant agreement just last September, just a few months ago, immediately going into contract agreement development with your professional team, getting them on site, through October into November and last month into December immediately, and then having them demonstrate a kind of a thoughtfulness and care in terms of the approach. I thought that I just think that for me, more of a kind of spotlight on the sequencing between moving through the process we all went through around approvals, getting through town meeting, et cetera, that actually get you to a point where you have access to funds in September to October to actually, having some nice breakthroughs and revelations by November and December is already great progress. And so that was one thing that helped me a great deal to just understand not only the sequencing through last fall, but then going into this winter and spring toward your documentation phase and the coordination with the PR, as supported by, I think, the conditions that were the grant agreement was based on. That all, I think the flow of that is making sense. The other piece that I needed clarity on was also the coordination between phase 1 and phase 2, grant agreement 1 and the proposed 2, and how they would work together. And I think that through the development of your material this evening, I've got a much better grasp of that. And bravo, nice job. So I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, so much. Any response, Tom or Rosalind, that you want to make to Tom?
Just thank you, Tom. It's been it's pleasure to work with somebody who, as an architect, you know what we're dealing with, and the logic that you have is something very, very consistent with what I like to think as well. I like to think things in sequencing and how to. But this is what amazes me is this is a multidimensional initiative. There's all the project stuff. There's a whole funding and stuff. There's a whole marketing stuff. There's a whole program stuff. All that has to be coordinated so that early 2024, this building is open, fully operational. Maybe my hope would be on Patriots Day in October. And Patriots Day in April of 2024, we can have a grand opening of the Wright Tavern, and so that we've worked out all the kinks, so we're ready for the October reenactment. And I think, and I've talked to some people and some of the architects we talked to think what we're talking about is we're not making major changes. There's walls are not moving. We're not moving doors, and the windows have already been replaced. A lot of stuff is really behind the walls. And then how do we look at the recreation of a 18th, 19th century tavern and the kind of museum experience that we want people to have? So that's all ahead of us.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Yeah, hi, Rosalind Thompson. Thanks very much for the presentation. It helped clarify the phasing and sort of how you're thinking of the project and the development. I think if you looked at the video from the last meeting, I used the word mystery. I didn't mean that to be disrespectful. It's just that there was a lack of clarity in my mind, not about the project sequencing, but in the funding. The CPC is sitting here with a finite number of funds to apply to projects, some of which are kind of shovel ready, some of which are ready to kind of launch right after town meeting, and others slower. When I look at the funding from last year, and as far as I know, what your expenditures have been, my understanding is you've spent a small percentage of the funding from last year. And that'll be the case even at the time of town meeting. So in the current request of an additional $260,000, it almost seems like you're banking the funds. Now that may be a worthwhile thing to do because there may be a tremendous need in the next year for all of the funds. But I'd like some clarity on that because you haven't spent the funds for good reasons. The planning has taken longer. I understand that. But if we're going to commit another 260,000 and take that away from other projects that perhaps need that more immediately, I need to understand that.
I can speak to that, or at least start it. We have tried to be very careful in how we spend money and how fast we spend it, and so once we had the signed agreement in September, that was when we started with the contractual arrangements with the historic preservation architects, the regular architect, the engineer, and all of that. And we advised all of them and said the exploratory and the demo phase we knew that between September and December we were probably going to spend less than $20,000 because most of what we were spending was time and not money. Many meetings that walking through the tavern, for example, that didn't add up to a lot of money. What we figured out, this is the team of architects, historic preservation advisors, and engineering team. What we learned by the end of November, coming into the beginning or middle of December, was we were able to scope the work that's going to happen January, February, March, April. And if it's any comfort to you, I can promise you that we're going to be dropping $30,000 checks very quickly. The work for the structural engineer alone to get clarity on what needs to be recommended for the roof is probably going to be in the range of $30,000 to $60,000, that final piece of reporting. And that's because we're being careful. We could spend a lot less money if we just took down the third floor walls and ceilings and they could just see everything the way it is. And because we're absolutely not going to do that, there's a much more squirrely process that involves climbing into holes and sending cameras into squiggly spaces and climbing up into the attic and walking around on boards. And I tell you, it's gymnastic. I wouldn't want to do it myself personally. But I believe that we're going to spend probably about $100,000 of the funds that were provided for last summer. I think we're going to spend that before June, and there'll probably be another $100,000 spent before September. So we are not looking at this as banking it. We are looking at it, at the process as going as carefully as we can, but well, I don't know if it's reassuring to you. It is very reassuring to me to know that the town and that you recommended that those funds be available, because the trustees and the Wright Tavern Legacy Trust would be pretty daunted by the idea of what it's going to cost just to get the blueprints.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I didn't mean to use the term banking in a negative way.
No,
that may be very part of the planning, that you're going to need a lot of money fast. It appeared. I just look at the cash flow to date, and it looks like you haven't spent a lot of the money previously. So what are you going to need? I'm just trying to get clarity on that whole sequence. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great question. One of the things we've been thinking about, and it kind of holistically or strategically, if you will, to have this thing open by, I'll call it January, February of 2024, means that 23 is when most of the work is going to get done. The tenants are going to move out in September of 22. So we basically have a year and a quarter, year and 3 months to get all the work done. So if we waited to phase 2 until next year, that puts that whole funding a year off, which then means that we'd have to go find funding some other place and some other sources, which we are confident we can do that, particularly given the support we've had so far. But the issue is really, just like you said, it's the sequence of trying to get so much done. It really from September 2022 to December of 23, all the work we want to do, and kind of reinforce the point. We measure twice, cut once. We believe in the historic preservation. We want to uncover anything as we go through this process that is like when you do like an architectural dig, all of a sudden we discover there's writing on the wall, or there is a particular way of tongue and groove that we want to showcase in some ways. We have to pay attention to that stuff all the way along the line. So that's kind of why we have kind of positioned the budgeting process as we have.
I'll say one more thing too, Paul, that maybe you've experienced if you've ever lived in and around a historic building. We have been pretty shaken by what we've seen with the supply chain and what we're hearing from various contractors. And because we're on this tight schedule and we can't really do major work until September, this coming September, we have a project plan that calls for us to start ordering materials and equipment, like everything ranging from dumpsters to the actual, nails and wood and things like that, starting in June, so that it's there on site in August, so that we can start work September 1st. Because if we wait until September, we might not be able to get supplies until December. So some sorts of things we know full well that we're not going to be doing just in time construction processing the way one normally would, because it's not trustworthy right now, where there are so many backlogs with everything from PVC pipes to cement mixers, getting to scaffolding. There's so many things now where there's an 8-week delay, a 10-week delay, and we don't want to do that. So we're going to order in advance starting at the beginning of the summer.
Thank you. Peter, Paul, do you have a follow-up question? Are you?
No, that's very good. Thank you for the explanation. Very helpful.
Okay, Peter?
I just wanted to follow up on Paul's question a little bit. Is there an opportunity to create a parallel effort between phases 1 and 2 so that possibly the timeline can be a little bit compressed in terms of all the deadlines you're up against?
Yeah, the phase 1, phase 2 is a funding exercise. There's a difference here in terms of actual the work. If you sense what I mean, they are not sequenced. There's going to be an overlap, and kind of driven by the tasks that need as we discover both what's needed and also what we want to have in terms of the design itself. So a lot of that's going to be driven, I think, in some ways, with the planning process that we're going to be engaged this spring. So yeah, we might very much we would see there's an overlap in terms of the timing of those two. So it's really I wanted to clarify, because there's some questions about what's the difference in the two, and the kinds of things that are in one are different in two, because one deals with sort of structural integrity, the other one relates to the capabilities of the building going forward. But while we have the floors open up or walls opened up, we're going to deal with both issues at the same time.
Okay.
But that's why we're like, so I feel like we measure twice, cut once.
Right.
I'll answer that as well by saying, in our minds, although we are describing them as phases 1, 2, and 3 for funding, as Tom said, for clarity around how we think about how the money's going to flow, the actual work is very much already working in parallel. So we have, even right now, even though we're only several months deeply into this, the engineering plan, the initial, the contractor who is doing delicate demo, they're working side by side and developing their separate reports in parallel. The architecture team is already well underway with their initial designs around the architectural blueprints, in part because some of what happens architecturally will be dependent upon what happens structurally and vice versa. So they're working in parallel now. Tom and I are already deep into the fundraising planning for funds well beyond the amounts that the CPC and the town might provide, in part because we think that just the repairs and the work on the building itself is probably likely to hit 2 million or more, and we don't intend to come to the town for that full amount. So that's working in parallel as well, and then the interior design. the museum design. That's also already starting in parallel. So you're absolutely right, Peter. I mean, I think that the right way we're all thinking about this on the leadership team and the trustees as well are thinking that the most efficient thing we can do is have multiple parallel tracks that can inform the others. Hopefully won't derail the others, but will allow us to maximize our efficiencies. And it's also, we're finding, allowing for a very interesting collaboration between professionals. People who might not normally meet each other are now working side by side. It's
Thank
fun.
you. Thank you so much. Nancy. Nancy, you're on mute.
I'll get that someday. Sorry. I think what you guys have described in greater detail today is a really great mission and really lofty and expansive aspirations. I continue to be very troubled by the fact that CPC has a responsibility to ensure that CPC funds are utilized in conformance with the Secretary of the Interior standards. Tom said some things that made me very, very nervous about, and this goes directly to my concern. We don't know what it's going to look like, and we don't want to have restrictions on what we can do in the interior. That's directly in opposition to the spirit and intent of the Secretary's standards. And so I'm concerned about the lack of any documentation of the progress. I mean, this PowerPoint slide is great, but there's no meat behind what you're telling us. $30,000 to $60,000 for the engineer to do preliminary conditions, is that what it was? Really is going to be dwarfed by the costs of creating the plans and the specifications. I'm concerned about the team. I don't see any reflection of the historical architect's input here yet. And it seems like you're hiring new historical architects to do interior design, but that hasn't happened yet. And those guys are going to be the project manager. I just think, I think the safest thing for us, and in our role, as Diane said before, as fiduciary agents for the town, would be to stick with really fully implementing the structural work that you told us was so critical and that we funded for $260,000, and to stick with that. It puts back the schedule a little bit, but I think if you don't have a team, CPC can help you with your application, but what happens after that? And where is the team that will manage the project? And what probably will be over, it's over $600,000. And we don't have any documentation. We don't have any specifics. We have no idea what the interior is going to look like or what the implications are. The fire suppression system, for instance, would be different if you had museum artifacts in there, for instance, than if you, maybe you don't need or want a wet system. And so I think there's fundamental decisions that you all have to make in order for you to be able to put a cohesive project together. That's all. And I know this is all on the other meeting video, but I still don't understand how we can fund this second tranche of money.
Thank you, Nancy, so much. I have some questions, but I want, Tom, are you about to ask a question? Tom Kearns?
I will follow you, please.
Oh, you sure? Okay. I have several questions. Authenticity of the building, of the structure above the first floor. To what degree is that an imperative? I mean, we already know that the interior of this building has been de-authenticized by the many ways in which it has been used. So the degree to which the trustees at the First Parish have a responsibility for maintaining as authentic a structure as was, we know that's already in some ways been abrogated by the way the structure has been used. And you all are coming in now to patch together a system. I completely respect and understand that. But so how hard are you trying to keep what authenticity there is that exists in place? So that's my first of 4 questions.
So let me answer that in some way that this might be helpful, maybe respond a bit to Nancy's. In my experience, a project of this magnitude, this is a funny thing to say, it's kind of like walking in a fog. But like I can see where I am right now and the screen, I'm looking at you. There's a vague thing beyond me. When I get to the point where the screen is, what's in front of me is clear. So as you go through that, you get clear as long as you have an idea exactly where you want to go. But we're in the process of developing those points. And a central theme, a central principle, a central kind of covenant, if you will, is that we think that we need to discover all of the historical elements that are in the building. The writing by Jarvis in the attic, on one of the beams in the attic. There's signatures, there's things that we want to discover those, because those are in fact what this building is about.
Yes.
And so our part of the counsel to any of the people who are working on this is sort of like when they were working on the Big Dig, they kept finding, treasures.
Yeah.
I think we're going to run into that in some ways. And so it's moving very carefully through this process to making sure that we can both bring out and preserve all of those elements, because that's what the building is. I mean, that's what we're trying to create, even with the offices. We don't want to just create, nice white walls with, fluorescent lights. We want it to be, we want it to be the building. We want it to have a return, if you will, to kind of what it was with modern day technologies. And that's going to be an important part of it. So I think it's important for us to do that. And that's what we are doing. In fact, our historic documents, historic architects are identifying certain things that are important for us to do. And we're paying attention to those things and making sure that they get preserved. We have to. That's why we're doing this.
Right. Rosalind and Nancy?
I'd like to add that one of the most interesting things in the December meeting, as we walked through the building with the historic preservation architects, both of them, same ones that we've been working with for a year now and who have known the Tavern for decades, as we walked through the building, they both agreed that a certain door was authentic for 1820, and then a window was authentic for 1750, and then a section of wall was authentic for 1925, and then another part of the building. The building is full of elements that are authentic to different periods of time, and Larry and Stephen both were saying, so do you care? They were asking each other, how important is it, for example, to keep a ceiling that was put up in 1951 versus a door that was put up in 1925 versus, say, something else? And what they agreed was that it takes some time to think through those thoughts and to make intelligent recommendations as historic preservation architects. I'm actually very pleased by the fact that we don't have some kind of glib report that they produced before Christmas so that we could have something to show and they could write an invoice to us. That instead, they've been spending hours and hours and hours in the building, in the crawl spaces, in the closets, in the basement, and doing their homework so that when they do return with the reports that we're expecting in the March, April, May timeframe to inform the rest of the work, that it will help us all know the answers to questions like, how historic or how important is this artifact? What we all agreed on with a chuckle was that nobody wants to keep the industrial carpeting that was put down on the first floor, a year ago by the real estate company.
That's a relief. All
Yeah.
right. I'd like to go to just, I want to hear some, I don't know which way to go first. I'd like to hear Sarah and Tom and Nancy, are you going in a different direction or in response to the question that I posed?
I was just going to make a comment. I can go at any time.
Yeah, if it's okay, if you could hold on for just a minute. I have other questions I'd love to have answered. Thank you for your responses, Rosalind and Tom. That's helpful. And it clarifies some things for the public. And I think that's what's really most important. Who has been getting the income from the rental right now? And I guess this sounds like a provocative question, but I just mean it very honestly. If I knew that we were going to be doing the kind of changing to this building structure that you all were planning a year ago with us, I would have thought that as of September 1st, you would have had people out of that building. So who is getting the income from those rentals, and why do we have to wait until August to consummate their removal?
I can speak to that. For as long as the Wright Tavern has been the property of First Parish, the trustees of parish donations have been responsible for the management and maintenance of it and for its use. And it has been rented as a commercial building for years and years and years. The trustees receive the funds, and then some of that money is used for the maintenance of other properties, and some of the money is fed back into the church for its operating budget. Tenants for years now of all the different properties owned by the church have 1-year leases. We do not do month-to-month commercial rentals or private residential rentals at all. They have 1-year-long leases that all expire on August 31st and are renewed after that point. And there are quite a number of different tenants here. When the Wright Tavern Futures Task Force and the trustees agreed mutually 2 years ago that we were going to do repairs in the building, and then that we were going to start to think about participation in Revolution 250, we approached the tenants and asked them if they wanted to be in the building during work or whether they wanted not to be there. Not surprisingly, everyone wanted to be out of the building. The church cannot afford to go without this money, without the rental income. And so, in fact, one of the issues that the church and the trustees are working on right now is what's going to happen from an operating budget perspective when those funds go away. So it is a concern. However, the tenants were all given 1 more year on their lease because the leases did not expire. And had town meeting last year happened in April instead of the summer, and had the funds been approved for use beginning June, we might not have renewed those leases. Because the town meeting happened in July, by May of the spring, we allowed the tenants to continue because we did not know that we were going to have the funds to go forward. That's the answer.
Well, thank you. That clarifies. I have a third small question, just to try to understand everything. When you talk about the fact that the upper floors, the second floor, and perhaps even the third floor will be used for offices, those offices are to forward the program and the mission of the new Wright Tavern. Is that correct?
Right, that's right. There's some conversation right now whether Nishotic would continue to be there.
Would you explain what Nishotic is for those people who do not know, Tom?
Yeah, that's the architectural firm that has been in the Wright Tavern for almost 30 years. And so they're kind of partners. They're sort of, they're family, if you will. And so the question is, what do they need in terms of their future? And that's all part of our planning process to figure out what they need and what we're going to need in terms of staff for the Wright Tavern, because it'll take us a while to staff up, and there's some issues around that. But just in terms of how do we get, we don't get ahead of our skis relative to staffing, but we want as quickly as possible to get professionals in there to manage the programs and to manage the building, and particularly going forward. So our planning right now is that in 2023, we'll probably hire an executive director. So you need one office for that. But given office things, maybe we can just do with one office, and because everybody's going to be remote, and so, or do we need offices for 5 people? So all those things are sort of to be determined at this point in time. Does that answer your question?
Imagine, therefore, it will be still a slightly commercial enterprise as well as a museum.
Yeah, and one of the things that I knew, the Freedom's Way has actually approached us about a couple years ago about needing office space. We thought about maybe what we could do is we really use, if the shot doesn't go there, or we can find ways to accommodate, we could have some other affiliate organization like Freedom's Way or the Robbins House or other people who might need space, who are going to be partners with us in doing programs, to have an office space. That's what we would love for that space to be for. Rather than sell it to have a real estate company, because that's not really consistent with our sense of what this building is going to be about. And I'm not sure they want to be there either, because there's going to be kids going through there during the day. There's going to be people walking through there. There's going to be stuff happening, and I'm not sure they would want to be in a space like that. So we're looking more for it to be what I call affiliates and partners, and as well as whatever staff is. And once again, it's a pretty big space, but it's complicated, but it's okay.
Thank you so much. And then I have a fourth question. In the description that you've given us, which is so full and thoughtful, that it's going to be a return to be a tavern. Now, do you mean that literally or metaphorically?
Metaphorically, because there may be legal issues around having an actual tavern that serves alcohol. On the space, and one of the questions that we're going to look at in the design is how much do we want to create an operating kind of plan? That's a to be determined kind of question. That's what we're going to figure out this spring, but it would be part of what the experience is that when people come in, and what they see, what they feel, what they hear, all that we are going to be working on in really this spring, and hopefully by the time we come back with you, and I'd love to do this, as we say, like the May or June, say, here's what we want to do. Here's the plans, here's an experience, here's a model. And we would have worked with, this interior design architect, who was also a preservation architect as well, to say, here it is. This is what it's going to look like, And then we can really have serious discussions about the PR as well, because now we're saying we want it to look like this.
Thank you. So more a Sturbridge Village kind of tavern than a village tavern.
It was something that makes the building unique within the sort of the historical structures in Concord, but something that Concord will be very proud of. We want the town to say this. They want people. We want people to we want to attract it. We want to be able to attract tourists, and that they say wow, and we're proud of that. And we also don't compete with the Concord Museum or the Orchard House or the Robbins House. We don't compete. Really create our own unique experience.
Well, it is a unique experience, Tom, is it not? Thank you so much. Sarah, I'm sorry, Rosalind, did you want to add something? I apologize.
I wanted to add one small thing, which is that when the leadership trust and the trustees think about the Wright Tavern, returning the Wright Tavern to be a center for democracy, and for thinking about the founding of democracy, culturally and historically, at the time, in the years leading up to the revolution, taverns were where people met to discuss and debate, where men in particular met to discuss and debate. But because of the Wright Tavern's very particular role, especially between the October 1774 time frame, and then its occupation by the British, and then its return. The Wright Tavern for so long has been closed up, and a lot of that history is not known. And in fact, for a long time, the Wright Tavern didn't even appear on tourist maps of Concord. And part of what we want to do is bring it back so that its role as a partner, a player, a setting for the foundation of democracy is more visible again and is known again. And to that end, thinking about the office spaces upstairs, we use the word office space casually, but we also are thinking about educational space, an office for interns, for scholars. We've had casual conversations with a number of academic institutions that might be interested. So we're just saying, when we talk about office, we don't only mean commercial. We're also thinking about this from the educational institution perspective.
That's the reason I asked the question. Thank you. So
Yeah.
very specifically, Sarah. Thank you, and then Nancy.
So first of all, thank you very much. This is really helpful, really interesting discussion. I'm just listening and learning a lot. And I really have a comment, but it would be helpful to have your response to the comment. Is I certainly support the lofty goals of what we want the Wright Tavern to be and how we want it to, be known and visited and such like. But I am definitely concerned about this date in the sand where everything has to get done by, according to the goals that you've laid out, as far as being ready by early 2024. Because as I hear you talk about the plans, there's a lot of unknowns about what you're going to find, about how you're going to have to make decisions, who will be part of that decision. Obviously, there's a lot of experts in even just in Concord that could be involved in that. And this is going to take time. And you've also talked about how you expect that there's going to be delays in obtaining whatever you need. You don't know half of the things you need because you don't know yet what exactly you need to do. So I think I personally, I'm a little concerned that we shouldn't move fast for this April goal or early 2024 goal. There's, we're going to have Patriots Day every year. Even if it's not open to the public on the dates you're looking at, this outside the tavern, there's still going to be an opportunity to show it off and talk about what's going on and what will come the following year or whenever it's going to be ready. So that's kind of what I'm thinking as I listen to all of this, and I'd appreciate your reaction, I guess.
Well, I appreciate your honesty about that, because I'm a little nervous about it as well, but you always have to be nervous. But you also have to set a goal that people are really clear about. And part of the strategy here is to be bold about our vision and be specific about when, to galvanize and to create a sense of urgency. At the same time, it really is important for us, as we've said all along, to preserve what the historical elements of that building, because that is what it is. So it could be that when April 2024 comes, we still are doing some important work, and it's I would really hope that it's open for the October event, because we had a conversation earlier this week with Jonathan Lane, who's the head of the state for the Revelation 250, and one of the ideas that he and the Council for the Mass Council for Social Studies has actually been talking about us in relation to a celebration. And that is the Congress happened when there were about 300 people who came to Concord for this part of the assembly. There were 2 representatives from every town. So what the Council on Social Studies is playing around with the idea is that asks the towns in Concord to send 2 high school students, and they will be the delegates to come into Concord, and recreating sort of like a UN Day kind of thing, which is
Model UN kind of deal.
With at the Wright Tavern around the founding of the separation from Britain, the dilution of an authoritarian, and the creation of democracy. And to do that with kids and to break them into committees and have a meeting in the Wright Tavern, and maybe the Concord Museum, maybe some like First Parish. It's an idea. So I would really, really like to have the building. We may not have all of the fancy stuff up that ultimately we'll have, but we'd love to be able to have an event like that, to have really have this date have most of that work being done by that date. That's my sort of real wish that's behind the scenes here. But part of the strategy is being clear so we can keep a sense of urgency and move things forward. Because otherwise, the one thing you also alluded to is that the task will fill the time that's allotted to it. And so if we aren't clear about the other end, and we open up to lots of conversations with people want to talk about it forever. I know that.
Thank you. I'm cognizant of time here, so I'm going to just move us forward a little bit. Nancy? And then Tom Burns, and then I think we're gonna, unless there's a, I'll ask for public comments, but let's go.
Well, yeah, there's so much to unpack here. It's very hard. We need a lot of time to do this. I'm curious about, you know, how your Sturbridge comment, Diane, and Tom's comment about making an 18th century tavern again, where, you know, there's a mishmash of dates and times. That runs directly afoul of the Secretary's standards because you would be making it up. So that's another thing to be thinking about. I don't know what your vision is. I think you're seeing an 18th century tavern in your minds, and that's not possible to recreate with any accuracy. It would just be like made up. So that's it. I'm done.
Okay, thank
Thank you. Time to move on.
If my Sturbridge comment threw things off, I was just imagining how they would recreate that authenticity.
Yeah, put a point to it.
Yeah, it's authenticity that I'm trying to understand, I think, and with which I'm struggling. Tom.
Yeah, I would just like to suggest for Tom and Rosalind, could you just take another minute and just, I'd like to hear you just restate your commitment to reviewing your progress on design vision, design documents, and the PR at some point in time in 2022, whether it's spring or whatever it is. I just think, so we really understand that you've got a lot of work to do, but I think your pledge and maybe a condition of grants is to bring that back. So could you just restate that so we're really clear about that commitment?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. To be really clear, the agreement, the 2021 agreement, says that we need to have a preservation restriction, a draft preservation restriction before we submit the final plans and specifications to you all about what we're intending to do with the building. So what we want to do is to work with all these various architects as a team, ultimately to come with a plan about what we want to do with the Wright Tavern, what it's going to look like, what has to be done, what has to be changed, whatever. And that would be sometimes in May or June. And prior to that, maybe the day or two prior, but maybe sometime prior to it, we'll have the, excuse me, cancel here. I don't have COVID, just to be clear.
I was going to say, I'll send a test right over, Tom.
The preservation restriction is going to be an important document for us for preserving what we are going to be on creating, and it'll be an important commitment. And so that all kind of comes together in that time frame. Between now and then, what we want to do is that we, as I mentioned earlier, we're in the discussions with contracting with an attorney that specializes in preservation restrictions. The first one we did was basically getting the boilerplate done. So we did that, but we missed the point about the interior. So we want to really look at what that looks like, and how do you create language that gives you all and others, particularly the historical commission, assurances that what we're doing is going to be preserving the historical character of the Wright Tavern. At the same time, we want the flexibility to be able to move things around and do the things we need to do to operate the places. So what that looks like, I don't quite know yet, because, and I'm curious as we're going to be meeting with the historical commission on the 13th of January, and the Nancy's going to be there. And so we want to talk through a lot of how do we do this? How do we make this work? So we actually can collaborate. And that's really an important part of it. So we see it all kind of coming to head sometime in the May-June timeframe, based on the inputs of all these various architects and teams and our own vision. And that will be informed, that will inform what the PR will look like. It'll also show you what we're spending the money on in both phase 1 and phase 2, because and what we're going to probably as a phase 3, in terms of additional funding we need for creating the experience. But that's our game plan. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
Okay, thank you all so much, and for spending the time putting all this together and spending time with us. It is very much appreciated. All right, I would like to hear any questions from the public. We have quite a few people visiting with us tonight. Are there questions? And you can so indicate this by raising your putting your raise up hand icon on the bottom of the screen. Yes. Hi, Linda Escobedo.
Thank you. I appreciate all the questions and the thorough presentation here. I guess one question that comes to mind, by the way, I'm Linda Escobedo, sorry, Select Board Liaison to the CPC. One question that comes to mind in the commitment that was just spoken by Tom Wilson is definition that it in fact includes specifications consistent with the Secretary of Interior's preservation guidelines. And while that may have been implied in what he was saying, I think it would be helpful to hear that. Thank you.
Answer the question, yes. The interior design architect we're talking about, if somebody is a specialist in that, in the Secretary's requirements. So we want to make sure that what we do is very much consistent with the Secretary's specifications. I'm not an expert in that area, but I'm not expected to be an expert in that area. To answer your question, yes, I would want our drawings, in our specification, our plans, to be very much consistent with what the requirements are. And also what we want to do as a vision for what we want for the Wright Tavern. So the answer to the question is yes, in both.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Does that satisfy? I mean, does that respond to your question?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Are there other questions that people have who are participating? Well, thank you, Linda, so much, and for your constancy in being a member by observation of this committee. Okay, thank you very much. And we're going to move forward now to the major work of the committee. Tonight we have, we're going to need to put up a chart, and I hope Heather will show us. Heather, by my accounting, we are about $118,000 shy of the amount of money, between the amount of money requested and the amount of money that we have available, if we are to spend all of the money that we have. Can you either clarify or say that, well, are you way off? But that's the mathematical computation at which I've arrived. Does anybody on our committee have a different sensibility about this?
Well, I think it depends on exactly how much the, which one is it? The Junction Village comes down to, because Marcia kind of gave a range.
The Junction Village, you mean that she said that they were going to come back with some sensibilities, right?
I think it said 200 to 250 in the letter I saw from her.
Right. I'm trying to find it on my sheet and I'm not seeing it with the same alacrity that I usually see things. Ah, I see. Okay. I think she said 250. That's what I have on my notes, Sarah, but I could.
Okay.
Does everybody else have 250? Okay.
Well, in the note that Marcia sent out, she said consider a reduction to 250 or 200.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what I was referring to. Yeah.
Okay,
So it really depends on which of those numbers we go with.
That's what I have too.
Okay, thank you. Is Marcia here? Yes, she is. Marcia, could you clarify that for us? Because we're down to brass tags at this point. And Carlene is here too, and she can perhaps tell us what her thought is about this. Carlene, why don't you take this for a minute, and then we'll go to Marcia.
Happy to. Hi, everyone. Thank you. Kitchen with my apron on, so sorry. I'm a little informal tonight. Marcia and I spoke about this, and she's here, and I see her unmuting. So, I don't want to speak for her, but in consultation with our committee, our landscape architect, with Liz Rust and with Marcia, we felt like 50,000, a drop of 50,000 was okay and doable for us for the short term, but that 100,000 would really have gutted our potential to do what we need to do, which is this foundational work at the start of this project. There is enormous work to be done in terms of removing removing invasives, excavating some of the area, moving some of the earth that will be disrupted in the construction of Christopher Heights at Junction Village to the areas that we need it to go. And we really need that 300,000, but to be good citizens, we understood that you are suffering from deficits, or not deficits, but not having as much as you need to support everyone. And so that's why we took the $50,000 hit, but $100,000 hit would really, I think, really, really affect our project. So with that, I'll quiet myself and let Marcia, state in her own words, her thoughts about this.
Thank you so much. Marcia?
Well, I know that the committee has a lot of hard decisions to make, and so I'm terribly pragmatic, and something is better than nothing. And so I know that that you received a lot of requests for some significant projects and significant amounts of money. So yes, I did put that range in my follow-up memo, but I think Carleen has made a good point and a great case. Invasives management is not glamorous. Moving earth is not glamorous. Cleaning up that site is not glamorous, but it is foundational to the work that needs to be done in order to create the kind of environment that we want people to experience and walk through. So I would acquiesce to Carleen's plea that it just be 50,000 and not 100,000 reduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. And I just want to say publicly that you've been very gracious about reducing funding on several projects. And I know that we all appreciate that very much. Paul.
To answer your initial question about the available funds, I just want to be clear. The numbers, the total available funds, Heather, 2,153,741. Is that's the number that was in the last version?
I think it's 2,183,441, but go ahead.
It's 2,153,741.
Ah, 215.
Okay.
And with the Bruce Freeman reduction to 30,000, there's a difference of $40,600.50.
Right, that's what I have as well. Actually, I have 40,759, but we're close, but about $40,000. If we fully funded everything that is asked for at the moment, which includes Marcia's reduction to 30,000, I believe.
Okay, that's grand. And we have lots of discussions to have, don't we, Paul?
Right,
So
right.
Thank you.
I just want to answer your question.
I'm so glad you did. That's perfect. Yeah. That's what I was leading to and hoping that Heather would step in. So Heather, we're at a $40,600,000 essentially over ask right now. Okay, my first question, what we have usually done is gone through by project and made some decision about how much to give to each one of these projects or to support with each one of these projects. But I have a question that precedes that, Heather. We have heard from our lawyer that the exterior painting on the Trustees of Reservation Old Manse is unlikely to be legal in terms of funding. I think we wanted to push back on that and suggest that actually, given the structure, it's really a structural issue rather than a routine painting issue.
I think he was just questioning it, and the applicant responded with, I believe, was an appropriate response, proving that it's more than just maintenance.
That was my sensibility too, but I wanted to make sure the rest of the committee has seen that and understood that and agrees with that adjudication.
That's great.
Are there questions about that amidst the committee?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Seeing none, let's move forward. Heather, if you could put up our usual chart. And we're going to actually go through right now, barring some alternative recommendation. We're going to go through project by project and actually suggest how much funding we want to give to each and see where we are. Literally one by one by one by one by one. So let's start first with the Town of Concord Regional Housing Services, a request for $28,000. Do I hear a motion?
Are we actually voting? Voting or just sense of the meeting?
Okay, let's do sense of the meeting, and then we may be able to vote by the end of the evening, Nancy. But we'll see.
Okay, just clarifying.
Oh, thank you, Nancy. Sense of the meeting is?
Aye.
Is full. I can't see everybody's hands, so we need to just kind of, if anybody doesn't want us to give the full amount, please raise your hand. Seeing no raised hands, we anticipate 28,000. The Concord Home for the Aged, 110 Walden Street. We've had vigorous discussions about the funding there, reminding ourselves that we're $40,600, $40,600, a little bit shy of what we need. Some people have suggested that their own assets might allow us to reduce this a little bit. May I hear any further discussion, and those who would like to just simply go forward with $150,000 for that project? Do I hear contrary suggestions for that?
I'd like, go ahead, Paul.
Paul, you want to start us?
Yeah, I think, this is sort of, we have to do this in some iterations, but I would say this is a project that I would like to see some reduction.
Okay.
And it kind of depends on where we get through with all of them, but I think, whether that's 10 or 20,000, I'm not sure. If we're $40,000 over, it's not clear that this should bear 50% of that overage, but I would like to see some reduction, but I'm not going to make a suggestion quite yet.
Okay, Nancy?
I had the same comment.
Are there comments from other members of the committee? So that we could see this at about 125,000 to 130,000 and put a hyphen there and see where we come up if we did that.
Well, if we're doing that, then I would suggest fully fund.
You would suggest fully fund. Okay, so we're still on the seesaw on that one. So we'll go to the next one. Trustee reservations of the Old Manse, $38,500. Do I hear anyone who would like not to give them the $38,000, feels that this is not worthy of $38,500? I mean, all of these projects are worthy, as Linda Escobedo so wisely said at the end of the select board meeting several weeks ago. But is there anyone who feels that we should not fully fund this project? May I see a hand raised, please? Seeing none, let's plug in right now $38,500. The Wright Tavern. This is going to require some discussion. And we're not going to avoid it. We're going to discuss it. So we've heard the presentation that we've just heard. Let's hear points of view and perspectives on this one. Please raise your hand, and I'll just call you in the order in which you raise your hand. The request is for $260,000. Sarah, would you like to start us?
I'm not comfortable with just paying the full amount. I can say that clearly. Whether we agree, and it's all to do with, as I said earlier, just the timing, and I'd like to see some progress before we commit more money. But how much we reduce it by, that would be more discussion, and I'm looking forward to hearing the January the 13th discussion with the Historical Commission.
Okay, thank you. Paul.
Yeah, I'm putting out a number is difficult. I would see a larger decrease for this than Concord Home for the Aged, maybe more about the $200,000 range. I know that the sentiment's going to vary all over the place on this, but I just want to put a number out there, 200.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Charles, and then John.
I'd like to say that I believe that the team has made a good case for why they need this amount, and I would recommend the full amount.
Thank you, Charles. John.
I think I'm somewhere between Charles and Paul. I'm pleased with the report that we got this particular time and the more detailed information about how they plan to use the site, as well as the much more detailed financial information. And as people recall, my questions in the past were, is the preservation restriction going forward? Is the current money being spent? And how will the new money be spent? Those are kind of my three questions. And I thought Tom put a pretty precise virtual condition on getting the preservation restriction done in this grant year, as well as the final plans and specifications. I'm largely inclined to fully fund, but could see a compromise when we have to work out our final numbers. I think one of the realities that impresses me, there are two really that I wanted to stress. One is that we've had other projects over the years that I've been on the CPC that have gone slowly. And we've been patient and watched and done our due diligence with a number of these projects, but haven't really dramatically altered their money as long as we saw progress in the direction that we generally wanted to see, without a high level of oversight and specifics. The second point that I think is important is there isn't anyone else doing this project for our town. These are the folks that are going to bring about a significant event in 2024 or 2025. And there seems to me appropriate to have some level of trust and confidence and some level of community support for this going forward in the hands of the only people that have ever stepped forward to do it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John. I want to ask one question. When you said a high level of detail, do you mean we haven't done a low level of detail? We haven't been down in the weeds, but we've been up, we've been kind of watching in a kind of a general sensibility. Is that what you mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking of a number of projects where we pretty much gave the folks that ran the project free hand. The cemetery, the Haywood Meadow, the Emerson Fields, Robbins House actually came back and altered their grant. And we were ultimately comfortable with that because of the goals of the Robbins House.
Thank you. That historical perspective is always so valuable. It's a good reason for people to be on this committee for more than just one season, so that people really know what's going on. Tom, and then Paul.
Thanks, Diane. So I would recommend fully fund. And what I needed to do was to understand the kind of rational sequencing, as I mentioned earlier. As some will recall, this applicant came forward with a request for $500,000 in their first round, in the 2021 round. And we asked them to go slower, break down the request, make it more specific, and potentially the actual dollar value. And they did that. You know, they worked hard. They really listened to us and helped us kind of put together something that we collectively thought we could support, and we did through that first round. And now they're back. And what has helped me is to understand that once they open up the building to some degree to do these phase one structural alterations, it's the time to also do some of the system work that I think Tom and Rosalind described. That is the right sequence to do these things. I think it was part of the original vision. They've now broken it into two pieces, but it still fits together, and it seems like a coordinated effort, which is what I was most concerned about. Also, I think too, maybe hearing Nancy's points and concerns, that there is a process for making progress and coming back and having presentations and discussions and reviews and being able to move forward. And it seems like there is that commitment as well, their commitment and actually conditions to the previous grant agreement and potentially to a next one. So given that context, I recommend a fully fund. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Paul?
Yeah, let me just go on record saying I think this is a very worthwhile and valuable project, and it needs to get done. This is very important for the town. My comments are sort of on the cash flow and on the money. I wasn't here last year when the request for 500,000 went out, but if we had given them free rein at that point, they would have, tremendously underspent. And maybe the reason why they underspent is because they were responsive, Tom. So I acknowledge that. But I don't think if we underfunded this now, let's say 200,000 or so, that they are going to run out of money, and they're going to come back next year and ask us for more money. And I think we could see how they're doing and make sure that they are on track with next year's funding. I don't think, we should forward fund this to the detriment of some of the projects here.
Could you be a little more, I'm sorry, that's a wonderful comment, Paul, but not forward fund. You mean we should cut some of the $260,000 out?
Right. And forward funding means,
I know what forward funding means, but I mean, what are the implications? Do you mean some people have said fund fully, others have said no, take 60,000 out or whatever? What are you thinking? I know this is hard. I understand that, but
specifically I mentioned 200,000. It could be more than that. I don't think we should fully fund this now. I think overall we're going to be very supportive going forward in the next round of applications, and I don't think the project is going to suffer because of that. So I would suggest, somewhere between 200, 230 perhaps, but not fully fund this.
thank you. I know this is tough, and I really appreciate the willingness to try to be specific. Peter.
So perhaps one of the questions we might ask of the applicant is, if we were to fund this to a lesser degree, let's say at 220 or 230, what might the implications be in terms of the ability to accomplish the goals? Because in totality, that's not a significant reduction, but in terms of the project, perhaps that would be fairly significant. So maybe that's a question we might pose.
Thank you, Peter. Perhaps we should have asked that this evening when they were here. To have them come back yet again and ask that question.
I think I would be in favor of a slight reduction as well. This is a terrific project.
Yeah.
But when the day is said and done, also, we have a lot of terrific projects, and we're just trying to look for ways to try and see if we can help each and every one of them move forward in a significant and meaningful way.
Thank you so much. Nancy, do we hear from you on this?
Well, I think I've said everything that I could without putting it in writing, which I will do as soon as I can. I don't think the CPC is meeting its obligation under the law or under the guidance provided by the coalition, which says something very different about our responsibilities in ensuring compliance with Secretary standards. I don't think we know what this project is. We do not know what we're funding, and we're going to put $500,000 into this. I don't understand how we can do that. I really don't.
Okay, thank you, Nancy, for your clarity and for your willingness to be forthright. So you can see that we're all over the place on this project, from not funding it and to fully funding it. And so I think we're going to have to go on to the next project and see where we are. Unless I hear a different opinion from the group. Concord Free Public Library, the oral history. Can I hear a recommendation for what we might do with that one?
I think it's a great project.
Fully fund.
Fully fund. Do I hear an alternative to that from anyone? All right, let's plug that in.
I agree.
And just as a small aside, in preparing for some work for another committee, I had the pleasure of going through some of these records, and and listening to some of them and reading some of the transcriptions, and it was incredibly valuable. And I think this is small dollars for a really good resource.
It's an amazing resource, isn't it, Burton? I've been over there spending time with Anka, and it's pretty astonishing. Thank you so much for that testament. Okay, the Assabet River Bluff Preservation Project, $1 million. May I hear a recommendation? And we're not voting on our final vote, but may I hear a recommendation and then some discussion? Nancy? Wait, you're muted, Nancy.
Just did it backwards. I support full funding.
For full funding. Paul?
Yeah, I support full funding. I think this group has really done their homework and taken into account a lot of community input. I think they're threading the needle at this point. I fully fund it.
Thank you, Paul. Peter?
Yeah, just to follow up on what Paul said, I think the applicant in this case has done a terrific job of trying to make sure that the community is well informed. I think they've listened to issues around concerns about traffic, and I just think that this is something that's worth fully funding.
Thank you, Peter. Sarah?
I totally agree and support fully funding. I just wondered at what point is the decision made and who makes the decision on what the percentages should be with regards to housing and conservation land?
It's very interesting that you asked that question, Sarah. This particular warrant issue will actually not, it be asterisk, but will not fall under the CPC.
Oh, that's right. You said, so we don't have to worry about that piece anymore.
Well, it's not that we don't have to worry about it.
We don't have to make that decision today. Okay.
It's got to be completed before the warrant. But what we've learned is that we can actually keep playing with it as long as there's a placeholder there in the warrant, and as long as there's a kind of a general understanding. There's some funds distributions and other things, all of which have to be managed by the town and various housing authorities and various things. I can see Marcia's hand up. So it will not actually be under the aegis of the CPC except our donation. Marcia.
Okay.
I don't think that's quite correct, Diane. My understanding is that it will be a separate warrant article, but the Community Preservation Committee will be submitting an article about this to allocate those funds for this purpose.
Oh, because I keep hearing something different, Marcia, every time we've talked about it, so I apologize. My understanding was that it would be taken literally out of ours, and that part of that aggregate warrant article would be the CPC funding.
Well,
but we have to mention it in our CPC report. So that's what you're saying, and I understand.
Well, I'm sorry, but that's my understanding of it. There are no other town funds being requested that are subject to a town meeting vote. That's why I believe that it is but because it's a land acquisition project, it cannot be in your standard list of projects that are being funded by the community preservation funds.
Oh, that's confusing.
Yeah, could you be more vague? As my mother used to say every time I open my mouth. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just thinking of all the other land acquisition projects that have been done in the past. There were separate funds either requested or provided by the town, but I would have to go back through warrants and check. I believe, and my understanding from talking with Stuart at the
she means Stuart Sagamore, who's the overseer of the CPC funding.
Right, that this would be a separate warrant article, but still under the purview, the responsibility of the Community Preservation Committee, because you are the ones who are making the recommendation to town meeting to distribute funds toward land acquisition.
And the committee does need to make a decision on how much funding is going towards open space and how much funding is going towards community housing.
Well, we can't do that until we get, until we see the deed, until we see the reappraisal document and other things.
You have all the appraisal that you're going to get.
We have that.
Any appraisal done showing parcel A and parcel B
Mhm.
will be significantly less than what you have for value. I thought my memo was fairly clear on that.
I'm sorry, Marcia, you have just recently sent in a memo.
It was distributed just before New Year's and was posted on December 30th.
Okay, on December 30th. I did not see it, so I'm the one batting blindly. I looked at all this stuff and I didn't see something new from you, and I.
Yeah, it was clear, Marcia. Please, could you just remind us though what the recommendation was in there for the land and?
Right. So based on the 6-lot appraisal, which creates a high value for the land of 3.2 million,
Right.
more than what is being requested here. We have defined the housing parcel or the housing portion as lots 1 and 2 in
Gotcha.
that 6-lot subdivision. And the remaining lots, 3, 4, 5, and 6 would be the open space portion.
Right.
The only way that those lots have any value is with the right-of-way that is shown with that subdivision plan.
Okay.
Because that subdivision road is what creates the frontage and creates the value. If you take away the road and make that part of a parcel B for open space and have the 2 pieces of land that are shown as lots 1 and 2, you have taken away all value of development for that property. And so the resource, the valuation is significantly less, and you couldn't justify directing CPC funds toward it.
Charles.
Well, I think, that this should be both funds, sums should be fully funded. I think that Marcia's memo was pretty clear and showing a very clear process or procedure toward an eventual division of the land between housing and open space. So basically, I have no problem with saying that committing 500,000 for housing, and the 500,000 for open space. So it. I hope that the committee will agree to the full funding.
Thank you very much, Charles. Sarah, and then Peter, and then
I've just found in Marcia's memo the recommendation to split 70-30 in favor of open space.
That's where I thought we were going.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul. Muted.
I was just wondering, a process check at this meeting, do we have to decide on those separations? If we decide to fully fund it, we can kind of figure that out. But if Sarah's already figured it out, that's fine.
Well, we can go back to this if we have any questions. I'm just trying to, I'm sorry that I missed this. I looked at it and I thought this was the same one that we had seen before, Marcia. This is entirely my fault for not having seen that. I'm in favor of funding this fully. I've not said that yet, but I'm fully in favor of funding this. I'm wondering about the legality of the whole thing, and I don't want it to be a Potemkin village. I don't want it to appear to be doing one thing when really doing another. So I'm just going to have to go back and do a little bit of legal checking on all of that. But I'm very much in favor of it. And so right now, let's plug in the $1 million, because I would be the final agreement on that one. And let's see where we go. Okay. I think it's 70-30. I think it's $700,000 for open space and $350,000 for community housing, or versa versa.
And that is only my recommendation, but that's without having, we have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow with the open space and with the housing interests. and I need to confirm that split, but I've just put it up there as a possibility, given the hurdle that the open space value has, and the fundraising that needs to be done. So
That makes sense to me.
Thank you, Marcia, very much. The Junction Village open space. We have heard that they're willing to lop off 50,000, so we're down to 250,000. General sentiment about this one? Hearing anyone who feels that we should be making this even less than $250,000, please raise your hand. Paul, you want to start?
It's kind of just a question. There's an exactitude to some of these, such as the previous one, and the historical records, and some of the others. This seems to be an estimate, so I'm okay with fully funding. But if there's a need for funds, I think this could take another $25,000 hit, and I'm not sure that would affect the viability of the project because it's an estimate.
Right, Paul. One of the things we do know is that the Junction Village folks are willing to give them $25,000 to help forward this effort because their equipment will be there and they're volunteering both the equipment and then some resources. So that should be a help, and so that might be a reasonable recommendation. I mean, it's a reasonable recommendation. That might be something we could entertain. John?
Oh, I'm just confused. I thought, had we reduced from 300 to 250, or did we hear 250 to 200?
No, we heard 300 to 250. Tonight, she said that Carlene and Marcia both felt that that would compromise the project if they went lower than 250,000.
Thank you.
And please correct me, anybody, if I've said the wrong thing. Okay.
And I just want to make one note. I'm sorry, I can't raise my hand when I'm screen sharing. So I don't know if you can see me waving.
Yeah, we can see you. Always see you. Go ahead.
Okay. So I just wanted to make one note, and I spoke with Marcia about this. I'm going to delete the historic preservation column just because I read through the bylaw, and the historic signage does not qualify under historic preservation. The historic signage could be done under open space or recreation, but not historic preservation. So I'm just going to delete that category. So it would just be a split between open space and recreation.
I was going to
I'm just explaining what I'm doing.
Thank you so much. And that we were going to make that comment and I forgot to make it. Thank you very much. And I think Linda Escobedo had also noted that. So I'm grateful for that change. So right now, let's plug in $250,000 and see where we are. John?
Oh, I'm thank you. I just need to do that.
Oh, okay. All right. So that's $125,000 for the open space and $125,000 for recreation. Speaking of arbitrary distributions. Okay. Town of Concord, the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. Now that has been reduced from $300,000 to $80,000. So that is automatically, that number of figures should go down to 80,000.
It's 30,000.
30,000.
30,000.
Yeah.
There we are. I'm sorry, 30,000. That's the reason I had more money. Hello. All right, 30,000. And do I hear any concerns about that amount of money? Paul?
No, it's just a question. I know that, Marcia, you just reduced that, and my understanding is there's no fencing in there. That's basically.
That's right.
That's basically overall Bruce Freeman Trail maintenance, et cetera. But that the whole fencing discussion that we've had before is kind of moot at this point. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
That's exactly what I understood too, Paul. Thank you so much.
Plus a further reduction of, I had 50,000 for small projects, and I've reduced that to 30,000.
Thank you.
Right.
Very much.
Yeah, just to complete my comment, I'm fully supportive of the full amount here.
Okay. Do I hear any contrary perspectives on that? So let's plug in 30,000, Heather. Now the Aspet River Bridge project. $300,000. And we understand this to be, just for anybody listening to this who's not been familiar with this, this is really seed money for something that eventually the Department of Transportation, DOT, would begin to help this whole project to be developed. The idea is to get our toe in early with very specific plans, in the hopes that that would get us in a queue for eventually more robust funding from the state. This has been an ongoing project and an ongoing discussion in the town for quite a long time, and is both an ambitious and forward-looking project. Tom.
Thanks, Diane. Important project. I support it, and I reduced it to 259,400 to zero out my math. So I just thought, given your introduction, Diane, about the project, that, you know, and maybe there's a discussion from Marcia about the impact that reduction may have, but it felt like, given the conversation we're having about Wright Tavern and other projects that are in these early stages, that a reduction from 300 to 259,400 seemed like a reasonable proposal.
Seemed prudent to you. Yes, Peter.
I look at this project through two lenses. One is Concord Green and the access to the West Concord Village. I know I've mentioned this before, but also through the lens of Baker Ave. And I had a chance to talk with somebody who works on Baker Ave, and they were asking me for recommendations on where to go for lunch, and they worked there for years. It just seems to me as if we have an opportunity to open up a link, or a more substantive link, between Baker Ave and West Concord Village that would benefit folks that are working there, but also benefit the merchants in the village itself. So I would propose funding this in full.
Okay, so for both aesthetic and commercial reasons, and also for the interchange between Baker Ave and West Concord, you would see this as an advantageous program. Thank you, Peter. Burton?
Just to add one third point to Peter's points there about Concord Green and connecting the businesses to West Concord coming from those businesses. I would add multimodal transportation. I know somebody who's been asking me for years, because she wants to bike on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail from Acton to her office in there. And she's been asking me, when they're going to open the bridge over Route 2, and that's next year, but when there might be better access that she could walk her bike over this bridge directly in there. And use, of course, as we know from visiting the project, this bridge would be right at the end of the commuter rail parking lot effectively. And so you could envision people riding the commuter rail and walking easily to what is really one of Concord's only sort of modern office areas. So I think that speaks to it. I did want to ask Tom, that number you came up with, the 259,400, was that simply because you had that much to make up, or did I miss a memo on a discussion there?
No, you didn't. I was okay. Trying to zero out my math, and I just rounded it to 260,000. Yeah.
Okay, so very good.
You use the 260. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And I was just going to say that, the final point, as somebody who kind of likes to armchair quarterback follow along on these transportation projects, and the TIP process, the 5-year planning that gets done, and seeing how Concord is particularly effective, considering we are a town that oftentimes is competing for projects against other towns that have fewer resources, particularly effective at getting these projects for consideration. And it is a very long, drawn out process, and that it is a 5-year plan, and you often get you hope to be in the 5-year plan. The Rotary project was I think in the 1990s, was pulled, and they've been trying to get it back in. Just getting it into the 5-year plan takes forever. Being able to take advantage with a project of relatively smaller size, when there's multimodal transportation funding sloshing around a little bit, and being able to say we've got something that's been permitted and designed, and perhaps taking a slot for somebody, for another project that falls through, it's really, really savvy use of our funds to be able to be there. And this could be really a multiplier. So thank you.
Thank you, Burton. That's a very articulate support of that program. Paul.
Right. Yeah, my short comment is I'm supportive of Tom Kearns's mathematical reduction on this. I think it's appropriate, not harmful to the project, as far as I know. So I support a modest reduction.
Well, let's put $260,000 in unless I hear anyone who disagrees. Since Marcia's on the call, Marcia, do you see I mean, I know you're going to want, of course, you're going to want the 300,000. Does this preclude you being able to do what you want to do?
Yes, it means we'll have to just go for even more grant monies. This was the $300,000 was hoped to be a match for a Mass Trails grant of an equal amount. And then we still need to raise an additional $110,000 or $120,000, which we were hoping would be provided by businesses in the Baker Ave area. So it's a long drawn out process. If we don't get the funds this year, it'll delay the project, the design of the project and the permitting of the project, so that it won't be eligible for the tip right away.
When it comes out. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Marcia.
I think
Nancy.
it's better if it stays at 300,000 in order to make those deadlines. I was persuaded by that.
I have been as well. Let's Marcia's cut back on so many. Let's make this a $300,000 grant right now and see where it lands us. We may have to go back and be a little more ruthless. Okay. White Pond Advisory is no longer a funding request. The Concord Recreation Department has suggested and made a request for $75,000. We heard from Kate Hanley last meeting before the holiday break about why this was important, about how long we've waited for this kind of study. So if we were to say that it would be fully $75,000, may I hear those who feel we could, that is too high right now? Burton, you have your hand up, but I don't know if that's because you forgot to put it down. Hello, Burton.
Yes, sorry, I forgot to put it down. I'll
Okay,
do
that's
that
fine.
now.
Okay. Okay, Paul.
No, I'm fully supportive of the full amount here, but I want to say I was impressed with Marcia's prioritization, that she rated this one ahead of some of her own projects. So very impressive. Thank you, Marcia.
And Burton, your hand's back up again. Is that because you don't know how to put it down? Or because you have some...
and yeah, sorry. Yes,
That's
I
all
don't
right.
know how to put it. I think I figured it out now.
Yeah, we're going to have a little lesson after. Okay, then let's put $75,000 in and see where that lands us. Staff and technical support. This has been something we have done routinely and funded fully. I'm going to recommend the $40,000 just pro forma. Do I hear any reason why we should not do that?
No.
Okay. No. Well, in that magic ability that Heather has, that puts us at having spent at this point, where are we? $1,478,341.50. And we have $2,194,341.50. What is the difference at this point? That leaves $237,000 or total available. I don't know which one. Could you edify Heather?
You have to scroll down to the bottom. 277.
277.
And the formulas are working properly?
I'm gonna double check.
Okay.
Yeah, I was following along on my spreadsheet and
So we're short 277,000.
No, we're not.
No, we're under
over.
270.
We have 170,000.
There's something missing. A
Yeah,
project missing up there.
yeah, I think we just need to double check my spreadsheet.
Well, there's Wright, Tavern and Walden that we didn't fund
settle on.
immediately.
Yeah, I don't.
We didn't put
I
the
don't-
wall.
I don't know if the math is working correctly.
Yeah, because
So is there nothing in there for the Wright Tavern at this point?
Right, we have nothing put in
Right,
for
Two of them.
110 Walden or Wright
Okay,
Tavern.
okay, that's okay. That makes sense.
all right.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, so may I hear a recommendation for how we take the available funding, which is, unless I'm misreading it, is $369,400. Is that wrong? We just said 277,000. So I'm total available funds for use, 369,000. Is that wrong?
Oh, can you show the, oh, okay, 369, 400, okay.
I believe. Is that correct, Heather?
It's not the math that I got.
She's checking, right?
Okay.
If the 1.78 million is actually the sum of that column H, then that compares to the 2155741, 2153741.
That I think that does
Right,
make sense
yes.
because it's
Yeah.
missing 400, what, 410,000 or something like that. The 260 plus the 150.
Is it, yeah,
Right, so this is what we have remaining to spend is 369, 400,000.
Right.
so if we gave full funding, just to expedite the discussion for a minute, if we gave $150,000 to the Walden and $260,000 to the Wright Tavern, that would be 410,000, which means that we are $40,000, same place we've been all along, we've been $40,000. So I think we need a mathematical recommendation. We also, I just would like to say we have a philosophical discussion to have. And that is about the, I have not, in my years on this committee, and they're not as robust as John's or as Burton's or as Peter's, but in my, can we cancel it now for a minute, Heather, so we can see each other? In my years on the committee, I've not seen us as at such a differentiation as we are right now.
Right.
I'd love to hear any public comment before we go forward for just a minute. John, you have your hand raised.
Oh, no, I had thought the 150 had for the Walden was a reduced number and was in the overall, but I gather Walden's not there at all.
No,
So-
it's not there at all. Right.
Okay, so we have to make some division for Walden and Wright Tavern
Yeah, we do.
out of this remaining money.
And the question is, do we make the reduction in one, or do we make the reduction in both? I mean, we have some,
Well,
you know.
Yeah,
some-
I do have a view that Walden has been a very successful project. We've
Yes.
never had a problem with their completion, with their use of money. They ran out of money once and had to go get more of their private money. And I think I would favor fully funding them. But that's just a kind of historical view on the number of years that they have competently come before us for assistance to our community and the seniors in our community. It's a pretty unique opportunity.
It's also a pretty unique project, isn't it? In terms of who it supports and what it does. May I hear any comment from from those people who have kindly sat through all of this from the public? Is there anyone who has a comment to make?
I thought we were not going to make a decision on that.
I don't think we are right now. Nancy, hold on just a minute. I think we have.
So,
Yes.
I'd still like to see how a couple of these other things play out. I think they've been successful. They've followed an admirable process. I don't remember exactly what the total amount of money they've received from CPC. And as other people have noted, they have quite an array of resources. So,
Okay.
so.
All right. I think
Oh,
we're.
I don't know.
Yeah, we're down to a discussion really of two projects. If we were to fully fund the Walden, then, and we were to decide that we would give, this is theoretical, to give $200,000 to the Wright Tavern, we would be golden. We would not have a problem.
We often save money
That's
in
what-
a
right.
reserve account, so
exactly
we
right.
would be spending this all down,
We
right?
don't have to, and we would not be under those circumstances.
Well, I don't chart, but I'm thinking we were pretty well spending it down if we funded
Well, we have $20,000 in the bank. is what
20,
we have. Yeah.
which is, yeah, not very significant.
But it's not significant, but there have been years, I have checked this very carefully, in which we have spent a lot of it.
Of course.
So that would not be unique in this year. I'd like some suggestions from the committee, and particularly those who've been on this committee for a long time. So I'm looking at Burton, and I'm looking at Tom, and I'm looking at Peter, and I'm looking at John, for how we might proceed. Let's theoretically say that we're just going to give the $150,000 for the Walden project, given its importance and what it offers to this community. But given their fiscal responsibility over time, there's somewhere between $130,000 and $150,000 would go there. How should we proceed in terms of the very divided discourse we have vis-a-vis Wright Tavern? So Tom and then Peter.
Well, I'm not sure we're very divided, Diane, but I think we're headed toward a.
Between zero funding and.
Well, maybe. Well, maybe I hadn't felt like that, but maybe you're right about that. So I guess given Marcia's compelling response to my proposal with regard to the bridge, I guess another way to think about this is if I reflect on the select board meeting that I sat in on, and Diane, where you did such a beautiful job, and they suggested that all of these were important, and maybe there was a way that the committee could, find some balance, that if we're looking for $40,000, we could take the Concord Home for the Aged from 150 to 140, the Wright Tavern from 260 to 250, the Assabet pedestrian bridge from 260 from 300 to 290, and the recreation strategic plan from 75 to 65, and we'd be done.
Okay, so you're going to take a little bit out of each pocket.
That's I just offering an alternative strategy.
Okay, and just recalling Marcia's comment about the $300,000 being a matching grant. You're still
understood. Yes.
Okay, so understanding that, you continue to hold that position. Okay, Peter.
I just taking a little bit of a historical perspective on the 110 Walden Street. I look back over the years when that applicant came forward. CPC had recommended, I believe it was the Historic Structures Report, which they agreed to do, and over time have divided the work up into various phases, which have been executed flawlessly. And I just think that this has been an applicant that has really managed their project in a very, very precise way and a predictable way. So I just think I just would like to offer that perspective that the application now is part of a historical view. I think this is what, phase 3?
Yes, I believe it is.
Or phase 4. Yeah, so there's a bit of history here.
Yeah, there is a history. Thank you very much, Peter. And in terms of adjudicating or in terms of deciding things, do you have any advice to offer?
I personally, I'd like to see this fully funded, but we are at the point where we do need to make some hard decisions too. So I do understand that.
Okay, thank you very much. Burton.
Yes. First on the Walden Street project. I'm going to again for the second time tonight, second what Peter said, and also there's been some comments about they seem to be a well funded organization, that they have their own assets. in a couple comments about that. I think their assets are probably in pretty good shape because we've just seen, you know, a 10-year market boom. It's almost unprecedented. And so their assets are relatively good. The other thing is, I remember when we first were looking at funding one of their projects, and it happened to be coincide with a time when I was looking for assisted living for a parent. And I found it extraordinary what they do there, and for the cost, what they do there. Private assisted living at the level they would be providing there in Concord is around, it's over $10,000 a month. And that was 5 years ago. What they're doing is it's very inexpensive, and it's a mission that they've carried on for over 100 years now. And the fact that they're well endowed and they can continue to keep doing that mission. Well, first of all, they need that funding to do that mission, right? It underwrites that. But that they can continue doing that, I think we should encourage them to hold on to their money. And what we're funding is the value of the building, which, if anybody's been driving by it recently, you see there is active work going on it. It's immediately outside Concord Center Historic District. The fact that this building will be preserved there, even if there wasn't this tremendous mission that they're doing, I think is very important. And it really is us who asked them to think bigger, and I think we should fund it. With respect to solving the disagreement, or not the disagreement, but the varying, getting to resolution on the varying views on the Wright Tavern project, I guess I would first ask, do we have a majority of the board that is in favor of funding it or not funding it, period? And then the next question would be, assuming that the majority does favor funding, is there a reduced funding level that makes sense? What do we accomplish by doing that? And then you might ask the same question about any of these projects, right? You don't want to arbitrarily reduce a project that needs 100% funding, or if it can't go forward. Whereas there may be another project where they might decide we don't need the original, glass windows. We could go with something, save some money, right? So that might be the thinking I do is first do a straw poll and ask, well, or do we have a majority that are still, despite the concerns that have been raised, they would be in favor of it? And then ask, well, what funding mechanism makes sense aside from us having to close the gap?
Thank you, Burton. That's prudent at best, at least. And I suspect that's probably the direction we will go. John.
Yeah, I think I'm very similar to Burton's suggestion, is to ascertain the majority support for the Wright Tavern project. And then for the reasons that I gave some time ago about the fact that it's an important community project and these are the only folks that are committed to seeing it through, make some kind of a compromise. I'd spend, I'm a spender, I'd spend all our money and give the Walden 150 and them 220. And just indicate that was the compromises the committee had to make. No reflection on them in any particular way. I think we can make our concerns in our conditions and I think we'd be done.
Thank you. I'm very cognizant of Paul's questions about the process, about how do we do this and how do we vote and how do we make decisions. And Paul, you're seeing it in action right now, which is that it really comes about through discussion. It comes about through balance, from really looking at very seriously and working with the applicants for how much money they really need, what we can do, and meet our both our requirements and theirs collaboratively. So there isn't an answer to how this works, as much as there is a congenial process that gets us to some sort of a conclusion. Paul.
Yeah, so I want to give you another mathematical calculus. I think Tom had one and John had one. We're within 2% of being able to fund this. So, if we funded every item here at 98% of what they asked for, we'd be okay. I'm not saying we do that, but we're close. I think we're discussing two specific projects here. I think John's resolution or proposed resolution, what he just articulated, I think is a good one. So I'll kind of go like that, but we're close. It's not, we're assuming we want to commit all our funds, we're very, very close.
Thank you, Paul. So John Cressley, you have your hand raised, or is it
Oh,
that?
sorry.
Okay, no, that's all right. I just want to make sure. All right, let's use Burton's strategy for a minute. And may I see the hands of those who feel that we absolutely should fund and want to go forward in a fairly significant way, funding the Wright Tavern. I'm not talking about how much right now, but could you raise your hand so I can see? Let's see. 5, 6. I see 6 in favor. Sarah, wait, could you hold them up one more time? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, Peter's up now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7, yay. All those who feel that we should not be funding this project in.
There's only one left.
Yeah, I know. No, that's Nancy. You have been very wise and very helpful in your discussions. I mean, I think I respect you so much. I'm sure the whole committee does. So I mean, I think this is a difficult moment for you and for all of us.
I want to say, I think it would be very important for people to go on the Community Preservation Coalition site and look under the Technical Assistance tab and read which historic projects qualify for CPA funding. And read that and see if you think the last steps for the project are being followed by this committee if we fund this project fully.
I think our collective disappointment, and I don't think there's anybody in the group who doesn't share that.
I don't think anybody wanted to fund this project more than I did.
I know that, Nancy.
But, and I think they know it too. I've been disappointed by the fact that they have not ever contacted the Historical Commission. So I don't know what the talk is about collaboration.
Yep.
And I've been very disappointed in that. And don't expect it to change, actually. So I'm sorry to say that. I'm very sorry to say that, but I think we have to be very careful how we spend public money when we don't know what we're buying.
Well,
and we don't.
Would you repeat your directions for anyone in the committee who wishes to pursue that?
It's the Community Preservation Coalition has a website, and they have a tab under technical assistance that says, what are the steps up for qualifying projects for CPA funding. And the last step for projects in the rehabilitation category is the subtitle. I was serious when I said that if they're thinking to recreate an 18th century tavern in a building which has had many changes over the years, they would just be imagining what it would be, and that does not follow. So I don't know if that's what they're really intending. I don't know what they're intending. They seem to have a vision, and it involves a lot of technology. And Tom has once said, he wants an interactive technological center. So I don't know where we're going with it.
Thank you so much. Paul?
Oh, Nancy, I have a question. So you've raised a comment about not adhering to the Secretary of Interior specifications. I don't know all the details, but then Linda Escobedo, I think, asked a specific question of Tom Wilson. Would he be willing to commit to meeting those specifications? Is there a disconnect there? Do you feel, or am I not understanding something? Were you not satisfied with that?
We had several commitments before we funded the first project that didn't materialize, that, they have not consulted with the Historical Commission. We could have saved them a lot in legal fees in terms of developing the preservation restriction. They have a historical architect. They have 2 historical people who could tell them tomorrow what the things are that they need to pay attention to before they rip them up. So I just don't see the management coalescing around what the requirements are for CPA funding of historic preservation projects.
Thanks. I'm just trying to understand what I heard. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to therefore make the following recommendation, and please vigorously disagree if you do. I'm going to make the recommendation that we fully fund the Walden House project at 150,000. And that we then consider the Wright Tavern funding to be reduced to 200,000 on the assumption that we'll put some money away, and that if they come back, they may ask for more than 260 the third time around. And we could do that if they seem to be making the kind of progress we anticipated and hope that they would. And we sit on that. We look at exactly what Nancy's asking us to think about. We visit if we can and are free the Historic Commission meeting in which the Wright Tavern people present and hear that discussion, and that in our final meeting on the 21st, I believe it's the 18th, that we exercise a final vote that kind of consummates those numbers. And rather than taking some out of this and some out of that, let's try instead. And Tom, it's I respect I respect your math, but let's try to do this in slightly more aggregate ways, and let's see what happens and sit on it. Peter and Burton.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we'd have an opportunity to review the information that Nancy had pointed out. I'd be very interested in this.
That's
I don't know if we can have a link forwarded.
I can send information around. I think I have it.
Well, that's what I mean, Peter. That's the reason I don't want to make a final decision tonight. I want to have a chance to do that and to hear the presentation before the Historic Commission and hear what they have to say and hear how that dialogue goes. But that's my sensibility. And Burton and then John.
Yeah, well, my question I think would be in part for Nancy, and I've listened really closely to the concerns you've raised. I'm wondering, are there any conditions that we could attach as part of the funding letter that you think might go to some degree addressing these concerns, such that the funding, like tonight I was hearing the sort of the verbal commitment to certain elements. I'm wondering what if we're putting those in paper, and I believe you're probably going to say, well, they had some commitments previously, but maybe we have a little closer eye this time.
Well, to your point, they had made commitments earlier, and there are provisions in the grant that weren't followed. And I think there was also just a general misunderstanding of what the grant is, what the preservation restriction was supposed to be. I don't think there's the experience on their team, or they're not using it. I think they have two very important people on their team, but I don't see any change from the engineer's first estimate for removing all the rafters and taking down all the walls and ceilings on the second floor. I don't see any changes in that, although I hear commitments that they may not have to do that anymore.
Did you say second? You mean third floor, Nancy?
Third floor, yeah, and the second floor, though, there's a lot of redoing. If you'll notice, there's a lot of restoration of floors and walls and ceilings and on the second floor.
Yeah,
and
I thought you meant the third floor, because that was
Oh, well, that too, she said maybe that was the good news, that there was that glimmer of hope that maybe some historic architects have had a hand in helping to craft something. But I would rather see them perform well in executing the first grant. I don't know how badly they would be set back. And if they perform, put a good team together, they have very ambitious fundraising ahead. I don't know how they're going to manage that. It is sort of our business, because otherwise they will come back more to us, I think. But a granting organization, if they came to them with what they came to us with, I don't think they would be funded. It's not specific. There's no project there.
So no specific restriction in terms of a milestone they would need to a restriction that they would need to put in place or anything like that prior to the funding, or contingent with as a funding contingency gets you there.
I'm trying to think about that. the preservation restriction, they could have had a draft already that would have been
Mhm.
satisfactory to the letter and the spirit of the law, as
Mhm.
well as to just them knowing what to do and how to proceed with the building.
Yeah, I was still sensing some hesitation from them there on that interior restriction.
Yeah, very specifically, Tom said, we don't want to restrict what we can do there. And he
Mhm.
also said they want to create an 18th century tavern, which they cannot do. There's no information to do it. So I think there's a lack of understanding of the whole idea of the secretary's standards. So
I also heard discussion about there being a commercial aspect still in that tavern, and that does fly in the face of what I understood was the entire, enterprise that was going on. John Kratzley and then Carlin. John, you have your hand up, or did you not?
Yeah, no, I just, with Burton, was interested in the approach of the new set of conditions and restrictions that we might impose. I mean, there are several of us that were in favor of fully funding or just a modest reduction. So I'm still stand on the side of funding this. I think they met with Tom, they met many of our goals with their new materials. And I guess I'm just not as rigid in the way I see our responsibilities in terms, I think we can do it with conditions, and I don't think we have to do it and haven't done it to many projects in a very detailed hands-on way. So I still would favor funding them, and hope we can reach that goal if we have to wait until the 19th or the 16th.
Thank you. We definitely are waiting until then because we've got some homework to do, and we've got some observing of the housing, the Historic District Commission to hear that discourse. I think, John. Carlin.
Thank you, Carlin Reed, 83 Wits End. I wanted to make sure I understood how this works out. We have the representative from the Historical Commission expressing concerns about an historical applicant, and obviously in the minority, but let me ask you this. How many people will it take at town meeting to pull that one piece out of the CPC article? Is it 3 people standing up and saying, tell us about this? Why was there such dissension? Is it 5 people that have to pull up? How many people would have to extract the Wright Tavern piece to have it pulled out of the consent calendar?
I don't know the answer to that, Carlin. It's a very good question. We'll have to ask Carmen Reese. And those protocols have changed so often given COVID, if you remember. We needed so many people to stand up to stop something or to, so I don't know where it's going to be by May. Whether we all happily meeting unmasked in a big gym, hugging each other, or whether we will all be madly distancing ourselves. It's hard to know. And you've caused me to put on my list of things to do tomorrow to speak with Carmen.
I would just like to suggest that if we haven't paid attention to oversight in terms of observing the secretary's standards, that I think this committee should really think hard about reforming its past policies. It's plain language, really, and I don't know how it can be just not observed.
Ignored. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm troubled by that.
Yeah, Tom?
Thanks, Diane. I have the, Nancy, thanks for the document. I've got the qualifying historic projects for CPA funding up on my screen. I think that, I think probably the committee may agree that I have been one of the people pushing this applicant pretty hard for clarity. And, and I do agree with Nancy that they've got some ways to go and some work to do. What helped me, and I think maybe I'm trying to reflect a little bit on what Burton's question about framing conditions. It's why I asked them near the end of their presentation to restate this sense of commitment, and also something that's in the first grant agreement conditions around coming back with design documents and the PR for review before the projects that can actually move forward. That they've, with funding available in September, got their agreements together in October. They've really had 2 months together with their team of experts, and it sounds like the team is not quite assembled yet, but they're getting there, and it allows them to really push forward now in this year in 2022 to kind of put together those documents that we can look towards. So that to me seemed like a reasonable and rational process for getting to something that we could embrace, and so that kind of made the difference for me, I think.
I think that would make a difference if you knew who those people were that had the expertise to oversee a project like this. And I think
I'm sorry,
don't.
are you saying that the consultants or the owners themselves?
Anybody who's on the team, who's overseeing the project, for instance, Tom?
I don't think they stated it tonight, and so I don't want to speak for them, but when we met,
I think it was the
when we met, the two representatives in front of us said that they will continue to be the shepherds of this project.
Did you actually meet with the historical architects?
No.
That may be a worthy thing. I mean,
yeah,
maybe next time they can come with their team. I just don't see the reflection of their expertise in the PR draft or there are no documents. I guess the engineer has a report, but we haven't seen that, or we haven't seen anything from the historical architects about the approach, even the general approach. So
there has not been sufficient.
No product.
There's not been documentation of the work that they've undertaken that we have seen. Now I know I missed Marcia's December 31st or December 30th report because I thought it was the same one, so I could have missed something.
Oh.
I
don't miss much.
But I did miss that one. So, if there is something else, to note, I'd certainly like to see it. John, you had your hand and it's gone down again. No. Listen, I think we have a lot of thinking and research to do between now and our final deliberations.
Yeah.
There are clear ways to do this without going in and nickeling and diming the other projects. At which you'd be, balancing this whole thing. And so I hope that we'll think about that seriously. In the meanwhile, let's move on, take a deep breath, promise to do our homework. And let's move on to the minutes. I sent a small suggestion to Heather, which I'm sure she saw. Does anybody, can we hear a motion to accept the December, and I can't do the multiple screens that my friend Tom can do, but Sarah, can we hear?
I actually had a couple of quick comments.
Okay, on which one, the December?
The December 7th.
Okay.
On the first page, Heather, do you have it in front of you? Under the subtitle, review of current applications and any new materials received, the very last word of that section, requesting, I think is an extra word you don't need. Do you see what I mean? Presenting more detailed information on each application. I think there should be a full stop there.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. And then on the second page, which is the last page, it's just a typo. The beginning of the second paragraph under other business and minutes, it's November 16T, needs a little H.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That was it.
Do I hear other emendations to those minutes of December 7th?
All set with those.
Hearing none, may I hear a recommendation to accept those minutes, please?
I make a motion to accept the meeting minutes from December 7th with the revisions just discussed.
Thank you very much. Do I hear a second?
I would second that.
Thank you, Peter. All in favor, please signify by saying aye or raise a
Yes,
hand.
Aye.
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 Okay, terrific. Now the December, I have to get a calendar to figure out what day that was, the December 21st minutes.
I didn't pick those up until 5 o'clock. I read the minutes, I had comments, and I didn't formulate the changes. So I apologize for that. I didn't have time before the meeting.
Okay.
I didn't realize they've been reissued.
Okay, well, I sent in a couple of comments. Let's wait till the next meeting to give everybody on the committee a chance to read those. Thank you very much.
Am I the only one? Or
No, John.
oh,
Yeah.
oh.
Heather, I just wanted to publicly thank you for the work that you do to hold us all together.
Yeah, definitely.
With such warmth and spirit. We're just so lucky to have you. I just thank my lucky stars and all of ours. Okay. Is there any other business that people have? Linda Escobedo, you're here. Do you have any commentary you'd like to add?
Just to thank all of you for the spirit in which you deliberate some very difficult questions here. And I think you've ended up in a good place in terms of what you need to do before the next meeting.
Okay, thank you, Linda, for that vote of confidence. And Carlin, thank you very much for asking the question about how this might be called out. I will speak with Carmen Reese tomorrow and ask her what the protocol for that might be. Thank you all. Happy New Year. And
Happy New Year, everybody.
And come out on the 6th if
Thank
you mind for January 6th. We're going to be on Monument Square with speeches and other things from 4 to 5:30, reminding ourselves of how very fortunate we are to live in a country that embraces democracy. So if you have a chance to join us, please do so. Come masked, come armed with a flashlight, come armed with warm coats. And if you can, please join us. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.